Ladies and gentlemen, sports fans alike, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago, one of the couple, two, three best podcasts around. So sit back, grab yourself a cold one and a Polish sausage, park your keister in the French room, and listen to Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
In Chicago, you know that all sports rock. The Bears, Hawks, Bulls, Cubs, and Sox. Pick your favorite, you can choose. As long as the Packers lose. For everything you need to know, it's Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago. Bill Swerski, Sports Talk Chicago.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. This is your hosts Alex and Sean. On this episode, we've got still some nothingness going on in baseball free agency. And I have some Bears questions that I got, and I guess a little bit of Blackhawks. But first, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Rockford IceHogs. If you're not familiar with the Rockford IceHogs, they're the AHL minor league affiliate of the Chicago Blackhawks. What does that mean for you? You get to see the stars of tomorrow today at family-friendly, affordable prices. Tickets starting just $10. Head on over to icehogs.com. Tell them Swerski Sports sent you. So, Alex, we were talking about this a minute ago, but I figured everyone can relate to this. Well, except we have some people that listen to this from warm weather places. So
I'm jealous of you, whoever you are.
I'm extraordinarily jealous of you. Do you have a couch or a spare bedroom that I could use for 4 months a year?
Seriously, I'm so sick of this.
It's never ending. This is the longest year ever, and it is February, 17th?
Yep, not even done with February. And February is usually the worst month of the year, but it feels like there's no end in sight.
Yeah, temperature-wise, it's not so bad, but it's like rain, then snow, then ice, then snow, then cold, then warm for 5 seconds so everything melts, and then freeze, snow, and then sleet. And it's like, give me a break. And it's funny, is if you're not from Chicago, you probably don't understand this, but anywhere else in the country, you can tell a drunk driver because as you watch them drive down the road, they're veering all over the place. And people that are sober are just driving straight in their lane. In Chicago, it is the exact opposite. If you see somebody driving straight in their lane, they're probably drunk as hell. If you see somebody swerving and bobbing and weaving, it is a sober person trying not to wreck their car by hitting these massive potholes we have after the snow.
Yeah, you got the potholes, you have the sheet ice, and, just the other day when it was it was in the 40s the other day, it was warmer, and everything was melting, and, when I was walking outside, every sidewalk, because, in the Chicagoland area, whether you're especially when you're in the city, but also when you're in some areas of the suburbs, there are some raised areas of a sidewalk, whether it's on a little hill or just the fact that the sidewalks are old and they're very uneven. But in the uneven slopes going down, it was like a waterfall. And then that waterfall froze. So it's like a frozen waterfall on all the sidewalks and driveways and parking lots.
Yeah, you don't live in the city of Chicago, so your town probably takes care of potholes a little better than the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
The city of Chicago, I kid you not, there are potholes that are impossible to not hit because they take up the entire lane of traffic. It's unreal. And they're not an inch deep. They're you have to completely stop and then slowly go over them like it's a speed bump, like a reverse speed bump, because you will blow out your tires, you will bend your rim, you will break an axle, you will do something that's extraordinarily expensive to your vehicle by hitting them. And there's a reason why the Waze app will pothole ahead, because in the city of Chicago, they are dangerous.
Well, yeah, and it's not like some tiny little hole. Some expand over the entire street, like you said. You can't avoid them, and they're craters. They're literal craters. They're not just little cracks. They're not just little, indentations. They're craters.
Yes, it looks like aliens came to invade and crashed their spaceship, and then it was taken away for an experiment, and that's the hole that was left.
Yeah, or like a meteor fell, or like a giant fighting robot stomped around. And the other thing is too is that when those puddles are created, the debris spreads everywhere, so you're running over some debris as well.
Yeah, it looks like Pacific Rim happened in our town.
It really does. And if you go by some of the streets where some of that water, like puddles, then you'll see puddles, like pothole puddles, and they're like, okay, maybe they're an inch deep or so, and then you go over them, but you don't see how deep it is because there's water in it, and it's a lot deeper than you expect. So you don't always slow down as much as you should.
So there's an elementary school that when I take my daughter to school, I have to pass by, and there's some really bad potholes in front of this school, like the block before and then the block after. And I was watching a kid and a parent walking to the school, and the kid's wearing his waterproof boots, and he's running ahead a little bit, and he goes to jump in this this was when we had a bunch of snow and ice, so they were walking on the edge of the street because somebody hadn't done their walkway and the street was plowed.
Yeah.
And the kid goes to jump into a pothole like it was a muddy puddle, and it literally went up to his crotch. That's how deep the pothole went. And I went, oh my goodness, that kid almost just went to Middle Earth.
With the mole people.
I was like, oh man, this poor kid. You're just gonna have to turn right back around and change him into some new clothes and bring him back to school.
No way you could go to school in that.
No, I mean he's gonna be a popsicle by the time you get him home.
Yeah, really. And you don't know what's in that water on the side of the street either. Ugh.
I don't want to think about that.
I don't even.
Yeah, it just.
Yeah.
So this has been, I don't know, one of the slowest sports weeks in a long time.
Yeah, it's nothing but annoying rumors.
It's just rumors and clickbait articles and speculation and yeah, it's like the worst time of year because when there's nothing to write about, people will just start just putting clickbait articles out there, and it drives me crazy. I'm fine if you wanted to do some speculation here and there, but don't put a tinfoil hat on when you go to do it.
Yeah, it's at the point where it's not even worth putting on that tinfoil hat, because at least early in the off season you can speculate some wild things, but at this point it's not even worth it because the stories change every day. I mean, right now they're talking about how Bryce Harper is so close to being a Philly. You said that a month ago, and then you said he was close to being a Giant a week ago. Now he's back to the Philly. It's just maddening.
What's the most amazing part is when they keep saying this team is in the lead. It's not a race. It's not oh man, that this team got out to a hot start and now it is not a race. It's a contract negotiation.
Yeah.
Nobody has sat down with Bryce Harper and been all right, who's in the lead now? Who's ahead of everybody? You have not talked to him. You don't know what he's thinking. And, if there's two close contract offers, maybe he decides to go where he's more comfortable. Maybe these news stories are being leaked by his agent to try to get the other teams that are interested to up the ante. We don't know. This is all a game. And we've seen that in the last couple of years that teams are reluctant to give these giant contracts for long-term deals. And it's the agent's job, especially this high-powered agent, Scott Boras. It's his job to get his player this kind of money. So he's going to do whatever it takes. And that is If it takes dragging it out till games are being played, then he'll do it. If it leaking to the media, if it's, whatever, that's what he's going to do to get him, Bryce Harper, this contract. And everybody's just feeding into it. At this point, I don't care.
Yeah.
He's not going to the Cubs. I don't care.
I know, and that's the other thing. They're like, oh, there's these mystery teams involved. Is it the Cubs? And then you're seeing rumors about how he's going to check back with the Cubs. It just, no, I'm not even getting my hopes up whatsoever. I've moved past that whole Harper to the Cubs thing. And there was that rumor for a little bit how he was going to sign like a short-term deal, but like a lot of money per year. So like a 3-year deal, but like making a ridiculous amount of money per season. And that was immediately shot down. And, now we're seeing rumors that the Phillies are intensifying and it's going to be a long-term deal with $30+ million a year. Yeah, I'll believe it when I see it.
If it's a 10-year, $300 million deal, then the Phillies are literally bidding against themselves. There's nobody else offering that kind of money except the Nationals. And clearly he does not want to go to the Nationals, because didn't they offer like 2 months ago a 10-year, $300 million contract? Wasn't that the story?
I don't know what the figures were in the story. I just know they talked. The two sides talked. So that sounds about right from what I heard, but I don't know how much of that is really true. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's still all speculation, but that's what I had read from. It was from credible sources, but
right.
Until it's from the horse's mouth, you have to take it with somewhat of a grain of salt.
I mean, we're looking at credible sources, like that are absolutely just like on a different page from another credible source.
Yeah, so it's there seems like 2 teams that are willing to go that high, and one put out a final that was, from what I'm reading, their final offer. And so if the Phillies are going higher and higher, it's that they're just bidding against themselves. And here's the thing, is right now you've got a bunch of factors in here. One, these general managers are not willing to go these high value long-term contracts anymore. Just not what they want to do, because it locks you into something, it locks you into a player for a long time, when the winning cycle is, with the way sports are working, at least baseball, is you've got a period of winning, and then you go into rebuild mode. And so you're in a constant cycle of, in best case scenarios, winning, then rebuilding, winning, then rebuilding. You sign someone to a 10-year deal, is the last half of that contract is probably going to be during a rebuilding years anyway. So do you really want to have all that money on the books for, a player while you're rebuilding? I don't know. That's something you have to consider. So general managers are less likely to sign these, or they're showing tendencies that they don't want to sign these players to the long contracts. That's one. One, I think there is somewhat of collusion going on. Maybe not as sinister as that sounds, but I think there's wink nods around the league of they don't want to drive the prices up like they did with these giant contracts. And the third factor is, I don't remember what I'm getting old. I forgot what my third factor was. Geez, what the heck was it? Oh, I know. It was the teams that are notorious for spending large amounts of money on these big free agents aren't in the market right now. The Dodgers don't need another outfielder, so they're not going after Bryce Harper, and they don't seem interested in Manny Machado. They had him last year, and they not that interested. The Yankees are not going after either one. The Cubs are not going after either one. So you've got the highest payroll teams just going, well, we're not in these races. That is going to lower the market for these players. And all these factors are going into why we haven't seen these players signed, but it's the agent's job to still get that money. So we're just dragging this out until the last minute, and it's frustrating the fans.
Well, it's kind of already past the last minute because position players are reporting this week.
Yeah, pitchers.
Like the required time for them all to be in camp is basically now.
Yeah, and pitchers, catchers already there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they've been there for what, almost a week now? And then you're going to have the mandatory position players all report this week. And I mean, you look at most camps and the position players are already there. So essentially, the teams have already reported.
Yeah, so you are going to show up late. And I guess pitchers are probably different than position players, but we saw it affect Jake Arrieta last year because he showed up real late.
Yeah, he did, because he signed with the Phillies, what? Was it in March? I can't remember, but it was late. It was into camp. And Yu Darvish with the Cubs, he signed right as people were basically flying to camp.
Yeah, so it's got to be a little bit difficult because, I can't imagine you're going to be going through the same routine and workouts that you would if you were on a team and you knew what you were doing and you had your plans together. Is you're sitting there going, man, I don't know where I'm going to live. I don't know where I'm going to camp. I don't know my teammates. I don't even know what team I'm going to be on. And I don't have a job right now. I get they don't have to worry about the financial portion of it, but that's just got to weigh on you a lot. And I can't imagine you're just like, oh, let me completely focus on baseball and getting my body conditioned for the long season. I don't know how to quantify it. It just can't be a good thing for the player to wait this long to sign.
No, of course not. It's probably one of those things where a lot of players want to sign somewhere, but there's the whole logistics to it. And even if they don't always make sense, it just, teams aren't willing to give them what they want, and they still want what they want. Their agents are going to get them what they want. So, there's a lot of sides going at it.
Yeah. So we'll see if Bryce Harper signs with the Phillies. Like they say that it's imminent that he's going to be a Philly. I just don't know if it's cut and dry as that.
Yeah, and I still think that Manny Machado is going to be on the White Sox, but I know the Padres are swooping in hard, and I know they say there's other mystery teams. At this point, I don't know what the hell is going to happen. They're probably going to sign up to a camp one day, and it's going to be like, oh my God, surprise.
So my feelings about Manny Machado are, if Bryce Harper does indeed go to the Phillies, then that really increases the chances that Machado goes to the White Sox.
Right.
Because that's going to take Philly out of the running. And I think they're probably they've got the biggest budget to spend this offseason. So I think they're desperate to get either one of those guys. And they're heavily in favor of Bryce Harper, whereas the White Sox have been courting Manny Machado since day one. I imagine they would have accepted either one, been happy with it, but Manny Machado is the guy they want. And I just find it hard to believe that the Padres would swoop in and win. I think what's, if Bryce Harper does indeed sign with the Phillies, I would put it as 75% chance that Machado goes to the White Sox.
Yeah, I would agree there.
So the White Sox fans are probably anxiously watching on, please, Harper, please sign with Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah, for sure. A few months ago, they were begging for Harper to sign there, but, I think if the White Sox do get one of them, it's going to be Machado. It's not going to be Harper.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Agreed. So there's not a lot going on with Cubdom, but there was some projections that came out regarding the Cubs this season, and they have the Cubs going 80-82 and finishing in last place in the division. I'm sure you've taken a gander at said projections.
Yeah, the Dakota projections that are based on certain algorithms that include a number of stats, including pitch framing, among many other things. That's just one of the unique things that are involved in these projections. And I mean, look, I'm all about algorithms and projections, but I think at the end you can't judge on what the Cubs are going to do just based on these numbers, because they're right and they're wrong every year. So I really don't take much stock into it, but I know it's got some people riled up.
I don't care, honestly. There's a reason they play the games, and
Right.
this is it, because you can't just.
And I mean, in the end, they're not robots; they're humans.
Yeah, and so these projections are, with their projections, they have a plus minus standard of error that goes along with the number. And if you look within the standard deviation of what their expectation is, it can flip they're all of the teams in the division are within the standard deviation. So standard deviation, the Cubs could be in first place and the Brewers could be in last place. That's how close they have this division. And I think that's something that we've been in agreement with, that this is going to be a really good division. I think Pittsburgh has a pretty solid team, and they're seeming like they're going to be the team that falls to the wayside, because the Reds had a solid offense, and they've added to their team. A
lot. They've added a lot,
and the Cardinals are always there. The Brewers are the team to beat because they won the division. So yeah, it's going to be a tough division. And if the Cubs, I would be really shocked if the Cubs finish last, but when you have all the teams in your division are good, somebody's got to be in last. Yeah, that's just the reality.
In the end, anything can happen. It's just, you don't take those projections as like the word of God.
Yeah, you go, okay, I saw it, whatever, and you move on with your life. It does not matter at all. And the fact that people are going up to Joe Madden and being like, well, what about this projections, the Pacoda projections? And he, like, what do they expect him to say? Like,
oh yeah, the Pacoda projections say we're going to do this, so that's just what's going to happen.
Yeah, we've just decided not to show up. We're going to be in last place, so we're going to go golfing. Like, what do you expect? It's a silly question. I mean, there's a lot of good questions that you can ask, and this is not one of them.
Right, exactly, and you know what you're going to get when they ask that question. And just to the point about these projections is, every year you see a team being projected to win more games than they do, and then you see a number of teams projected to do a lot worse than they actually do. I mean, I'm pretty sure the Brewers were projected to be a 500 team by literally every advanced metric last year, and they ended up winning 96 games in the division. I think they projected the Braves to not be very good. They won 90-some games and went to the playoffs, so again, it's interesting to look at them, but it's not something you should look at to actually expect an actual outcome. You look and see kind of the status of a team and basically kind of judge on their off season and the season they're coming off of. I mean, the Cubs won 95 games last year, but a lot of people saw it as a failure and they didn't do much this off season, while the Brewers excelled last season and they made a few decent signings. So, obviously there's a lot of other factors that go into it as well. That's why it's interesting to look at it, but not necessarily take it as that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. But on the Cubs, I guess the only the only two topics I was thinking of, this week is how long before Brandon Morrow is back, and with Theo stressing how important the April-May games are in a season, and they're just as important as the last month of the season. What do the Cubs do to hold down the fort until they get Morrow back?
Well, I think that's why you got Brad Brock. I think he's going to fill in at the back end, maybe as a closer. I mean, he's a back end type of guy, so he has closer experience. I think you could go to him. I think you could consider Pedro Strop, and I think you could consider Steve Cishek. He's been a closer in his career. He has over 100 career saves. I could see a bullpen by committee type deal when it comes to the closer and the setup man. That's kind of how I think it's going to go. I really do. One thing's for sure, they're not putting Carl Edwards Jr. in that position. No way. But I could see Brock, I could see Strop, I could see Cishek being put in that position.
I agree with you to a point on the CJ Edwards. I agree with you to start the season. There's 0% chance they regularly put him in higher leverage situations. But we all know that he has the stuff to be a closer. If he shows early on, like he did last year, that he's pitching really well, I think Joe Madden has all the confidence in him to put him in high leverage situations, especially until Morrow comes back. It's just going to be up to Edwards of whether he gets that opportunity or not. And we all know that it was very apparent from, the first 2 or 3 pitches, whether or not you were getting good Carl Edwards or bad Carl Edwards.
Yeah, every single Cubs fan on Twitter will say the same thing. If he throws 2 pitches not close, his first 2, everyone says, oh boy, here we go. It's really easy to tell. Now, it's interesting because we've seen Carl Edwards Jr. change his delivery a bit when he's been warming up. It looks a lot like Kenley Jensen, and he mentioned Kenley Jensen. I don't know what that's going to do for him, but if it improves his command, then great. Now, I actually saw him. They were saying they were comparing it to Clayton Kershaw, and they were putting it their windups side by side, and it's got a little bit of a herky jerky movement in there. I don't know how that's going to go. We'll see. We'll see in a couple weeks. Yeah, and speaking of that, they were also talking about mechanical adjustments for Tyler Chatwood. If he can make some adjustments and do a better job at throwing strikes, then I think you can get some value out of him. But we got to see that first.
I'm glad you brought up Tyler Chatwood because he's the other name I wanted to talk about. What do the Cubs do with him? Is he like an emergency starter if somebody gets injured? Is he, and then the rest of the time,
I think Montgomery's the first guy to come out of that before Chatwood.
And so then, Montgomery is your long reliever and your spot starter. What is Tyler Chatwood?
Well, I think right now he's garbage time pitcher. If you're up by a lot or you're down by a lot and you just need to eat some innings, I think he's just the guy to, come in those situations. If he proves he can throw strikes better, then maybe you start moving him into some more pressure situations, but not like a 1 or 2 run lead by any chance, like not a back end type guy. But, let's say it's a close game. And this is all if Tyler Chatwood proves he can improve. Let's say it's a close game. John Lester throws 5 innings. He's doing okay, but he's laboring a lot and he throws a lot of pitches. And before you get to your back end guys, you want to get through the 6th and the rest of the 5th, or maybe the 6th or the 7th before you go there. somewhere in the middle innings and you need somebody to come in, maybe that's where he is. But again, he's got to prove himself to be in that kind of position. I mean, right now, he's just kind of a mop-up garbage time just based on last year. You don't really have any other options. You can't send him to AAA. He doesn't have options. He would have to clear waivers. No one's going to take him in a trade. You're not going to release him because you're paying him a lot of money. You're just kind of stuck with him on the roster.
Yeah, it's a tough situation because they do owe him a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And he had 2 more years of this. So,
Yeah.
And I know it's been talked about a lot this week about the new Cubs television network. What is it called? The Marquee Network
Sports
or whatever.
Network, yeah.
And I don't know if you want to talk about. I don't know enough about it to be informed enough to say anything. I mean, I understand the basics, but and I have my opinions about Sinclair Media, but I don't know enough about this. But do expect your cable bills to go up $6-7 a month to pay for this.
I mean, in the end, I'm probably going to get it because I got to watch games. I have to. And at least
I don't think it's going to be an option unless they do it as like part of a tier. Like, oh, you get the sports tier, so you get like Comcast or NBC Sports Chicago and the Marquee Sports Network, etc. I don't think it's an a la carte like adding HBO.
Right? No, yeah, it
just they add the bill just goes up because you added another network for, it'll be somewhere in the neighborhood of what ESPN costs, which is like $5 or $6.
Yeah, I think they said like 6 to 8, something like that. So yeah, I mean, exactly. That's pretty much how I understand it's going to work there. So yeah, I'll be paying that additional fee right there. It's going to be different. We're going to be saying goodbye to WGN after all these years. No more CSN or NBC Sportsnet now. I am glad that they're keeping on Len Casper and Jim DeShays. That's awesome. We still get them. Obviously, the revenue is not going to start pouring in until it actually goes on the air. So it's not like they're getting a bunch of money now. So no, this TV deal was not made to get Bryce Harper. That's not how it's going to work. And as for the politics go, don't look at it as this is going to be a network about the Cubs and a bunch of propaganda, because sports networks like this tend to not have propaganda within their broadcasting, even if it is funded by Sinclair and it's a partnership with Sinclair. It's not going to be on on Sinclair television. Here's the Cubs. It's a Cubs network, Cubs only, that's working in partnership with them. So I wouldn't worry about it being a big propaganda channel along with Cubs. It's going to be strictly Cubs. And I know it's still a lot of people have mixed feelings about it, and that's fine. Political opinions vary among, and I can't tell you how to feel there, but all I would say is I don't worry about it being a big propaganda political thing. It's going to be strictly Cubs or whatever sport they're broadcasting.
That's the question is, so the channel will be on 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. There are 162 Cubs games, give or take 3 hours each one, plus spring training games. What do they fill the rest of that time with?
Well, there's pre and post game. They're probably going to rebroadcast replays late at night. Here's what I'm hoping for. If you're going to have a 24-hour Cubs channel, you better be showing a bunch of classic vintage games. You better be. I'm legitimately excited for that because I think they're going to do it. I mean, there's only so much you could fill it in, but you better give me a bunch of those. They may do a bunch of like podcast shows, kind of like what NBC Sports does, like what Big Dave works for. They might do things like that just on their own channel. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they'll come up with a few show ideas. We'll see. But again, I don't think you're going to see any political propaganda shows on it.
No, I don't. I don't think you will. It's just, I know for me, it's, I can't control much, but I can do my best to control where I put my money. And if you don't support a company, what they do,
No, I get
the only
that.
thing you can really do. Yeah.
I get
So
that.
that's my only point. But so it's not like I think that there's going to be, propaganda shows on it. That it's going to be like, because they own the golf network, so it's going to be like that.
Right.
But yeah, you're left with, if you do pregame, postgame with the games, adding in spring training, because they're going to play all the spring, or I think most of the spring training games. I don't know if they're doing the split, squad games or whatever.
How cool would
but
it
you're
be
looking
if
at,
they somehow had like 2 screens at once and you had both games? Like, how neat would that
oh,
be?
I know, that would be awesome. I mean, I wish you had like 2 channels of it. Where, remember in the playoffs they had the regular broadcast and then they had the Nerdcast,
Yes.
where it was like all analytic.
Yeah,
and
Jason Benetti was
could-
on that, wasn't he?
Yeah, Jason Benetti
he's
was
really
on there. How cool would that be? Is you could watch the Cubs game with, the regular broadcast, and then you could watch the Nerdcast of it.
Yeah, that'd be pretty sick.
But yeah, you're left with roughly 7,500 hours a year to fill with broadcasting. I mean, I would imagine that they're gonna probably play the previous day's game a couple of times. Probably throw in some classic games. I just hope they package it in a cool way rather than just like, boom, there's just a straight broadcast, some context of, why am I watching this game? Is it just like a awful Cubs year Tuesday afternoon against the Pirates and they lose 3-2 and nothing really happens? Like, give me some context of what game I'm watching or why it was important. Does Tuffy Rhodes hit a monster home run?
Oh, they should show that from like multiple angles on this new network. Like, go back to the broadcast, like find some old unused footage and show Tuffy Rhodes hitting 3 home runs. Like, how cool would that be?
Yeah, they could put the whole Harry Carey show on where just highlights of Harry Carey.
So, you spell this guy backwards.
John Jaha, that's aha spelled backwards.
And actually have Harry Carey, not that god-awful Ryan Dempster imitation, for the love of God.
The Ryan Dempster imitation is an imitation of a bad Will Ferrell imitation of Jim Carrey. So Will Ferrell does a bad imitation of Harry Carey, and Ryan Dempster does an impersonation of Will Ferrell doing that bad impersonation.
A bad imitation of a bad imitation.
Yes. So it is annoying, and I hate it. I absolutely hate it. And, you might say the same things Harry did, but the way you're doing it is just so wrong. I think one of my favorite things Harry ever said was, it wasn't even that it was like that, weird. It was just the word has a different cultural and time period connotation, and just the way he said it. So it was I believe it was against the Brewers, and somebody made a diving catch. And he goes, "Hey-ho, look at that snatch." And I was, at the time, I was an adolescent. So, I just burst into laughter. I was crying so hard. I was like, yeah, Harry. And I met Harry Carey, and I got to go in the booth when he was doing the radio broadcast, and he had a woman sitting on each one of his legs, and he has arms wrapped around him. And I was like, maybe Harry knew what he was saying.
Oh, boy.
But it's going to be interesting to see. I think at this point, the Cubs don't even know exactly what the programming is going to be. I don't think they really care. They will care at some point, just because they'll want to get that advertising revenue. And this is something I do know well, but when you have a basic cable network or series of channels, what you get paid a certain amount from the subscription fees that the cable company charges. So if you're ESPN gets like, depending on your location, gets like $5 to $6 for every single subscriber for the series of channels that they have. So ESPN, ESPN2, ESPN Deportes, that package of ESPN channels, they get for every single subscriber, whether you watch that channel and even if you've never seen that channel or you keep that channel on all day long, everybody that subscribes to cable will have to pay $5 to $6, whatever it is, of your normal monthly fee, just goes to ESPN. On top of that is any advertising revenue that they have during their programming, they get that money as well. So it's a double whammy. So when the difference between airing your games on somebody else's channel, like a WGN or NBC Sports Chicago, is they basically say, here's the fee that we will give you to broadcast the games. It is flat. This is it. And when you have your own network, you get a certain amount of money from every subscriber. Plus, you can build your revenue of your advertising base, and it's potentially an unlimited income as opposed to having it on another channel where that's it. That's what you get. Flat fee.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of talk also about whether or not the cable providers will be an issue because of what the Dodgers had to go through on their network, but Crane Kenny claims that's not going to be an issue. So, yeah.
That's
Right.
why they partner with Sinclair Media, because Sinclair can say, well, we've got this suite of channels, and you sort of lump it in, and they kind of bully their way in, as opposed to being like, hey, this is our standalone channel, and where the cable networks have leverage. The big issue is going to be what happens with cord cutters. I know for myself, I would love to get rid of cable and just pay for services that I use a la carte, like a Netflix or Hulu or whatever. And honestly, it's sports that holds me back, because I don't know how. I'd have to like stream on my computer, like with NHL Center Ice, and I'm paying for that every month. And I'd have to pay for whatever MLB streaming service. So with this Cubs channel, is there going to be streaming? Do the Cubs own the streaming rights? I think that's going to be huge, because if you're basing a lot of your finances on subscription rates, with all the cord cutters, you're going to start not having the revenue that you'd hoped. But if you can get streaming service like HBO went, all right, well, there's a lot of cord cutters, but we want people that cut the cord and to be able to watch our programming. So then they have the HBO Now, so you can pay $12 a month or whatever and have HBO without having cable.
Here's a question for you in terms of revenue, while we're talking about revenue. What do you think? Let me rephrase that. Sorry. Do you think that this network, and if it does indeed get revenue in, do you think it helps them re-sign guys like Bryant and Javi when their contracts are up?
I don't think it has any bearing.
Don't
honestly.
think so.
No, I don't think the Cubs are going to be the Dodgers and just have this astronomical payroll and just outspend everybody. I don't think that's what they're going to do. I think all along the plan was the Ricketts would front money for buying the team, for the payroll, making renovations to Wrigley Field, making renovations to some of their other facilities like the spring training park, and some of their other facilities. I think they fronted all that money, and with the plan that starting in 2020, when they have the new network, that they're going to reimburse themselves for all they've put out. I think that's the plan, is they start making money.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic of conversation, but that's probably true.
I mean, I think it allows them the flexibility. Like right now, Theo's made it clear that they have a budget, and that's it. It's a hard budget. That's what it is. So they don't have the flexibility to make some of the moves that they would like to make. I think once the network comes out, it allows them the flexibility to have leeway with that budget. So if they were like, hey, we really want to get Bryce Harper in here, or let's go with Manny Machado, is we want to cut ties with a certain domestic abuser, and we want to replace him with Manny Machado. So we have a budget of, we can afford X, and we need to go up 15% on that to actually bring him in, and our budget is X. You have the flexibility to go up that little bit more money with the revenue that this is bringing in. Whereas now they don't, unless the Ricketts family just digs more into their pockets, which they're not doing. So that's where I think will benefit the baseball organization. But as a whole, I think it's just going to be the Ricketts finally starting to see a profit from their investment.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. That's a very good way to put it.
I don't have anything Bulls to talk about other than I went to the game on Wednesday, the one where
Sorry.
It was so empty. It was so empty. It was
the
weird.
300 level really, really empty?
It was empty everywhere. I mean,
Damn.
it was probably half empty. And I went with my friend Gary, and it was the night that Otto Porter scored like 40 points, which was nice to see. He can really play. But my point is, I was telling Gary, I was like, look at this half empty stadium. This is what's the future of the Bulls is looking like. People not caring. And that is what it is. Not going to be poor draft picks, inability to sign big name free agents, putting a bad team on the field, punching head coaches, hiring and firing head coaches left and right. None of those things are what's going to get John Paxson fired. It is going to be the half empty stadium and not selling out. That is what's going to get John Paxson fired. And if that's what it takes, bring on the empty seats.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're lining Reinsdorf's pocket with all the ticket sales. I mean, I don't remember because I was really little, but remember when the Bulls were really, really bad after the Jordan era? Did it ever get as empty as it did as you saw the other night? Because when I was a kid, when they were upcoming, it was never empty like that.
Most of that era, I lived in Philadelphia, so I don't, I wasn't going to games, so I don't really remember.
That's true, yeah.
But I can tell you about, the other team that plays at that shares a stadium, and the Blackhawks. You could count the number of people that were in that stadium at, certain points. You just like,
yeah,
it was empty. And I don't know if the Bulls ever got like that We'll have to have Gary on and ask, because I think he's a 15-year season ticket holder, so he's seen some lean years and he's seen some good years. But yeah, I couldn't say a lot of that. I didn't live here, but we've made our point clear that John Paxson is not the one to lead this next generation of rebuild.
Well, here's another interesting thing I heard the other day. My friend, what game were you at? Who were they playing? Was it Memphis?
Yeah. So we saw Joe.
You saw
Noah.
Joe, yeah. And I heard tickets were going for like $6.
It was terrible. The one cool thing was I forgot Joakim Noah was on that team, and there was one point where he was on the sideline, waiting to come in when they had to play stoppage. And once he came out there, the whole crowd was erupting. But from our vantage point, we couldn't see that. And we're like, what are they cheering for? I'm like, the Bulls don't have anybody coming in. There's no, and then saw Joakim Noah run in, and we're like, oh, there, Joe's in. So it was that was entertaining. But other than that, it was, and Joe has seen Joakim Noah and Otto Porter playing really well. That was about it.
Yeah, because my friend was at the game against the Bucks, and he said there were so many Bucks fans there. Every time the Bucks did something, there were loud cheers, and that never happens because it's always the other way around. The Bulls invade the Bucks games, but it's the other way around now.
Yeah, and it's, I guess, turnabout is fair play, but you know what? It's the Bulls' fault. Put a product on the field or on the court.
And Milwaukee has.
Yep, they have, and their stadium it's getting to be a tougher ticket to get, and it's a lot cheaper to get a Bulls ticket, and you can look at it as, oh, hey, my buddies and I, or my wife and I, or whatever, we spend the night in Chicago. We go out, have a nice meal, see the city, go to the game for next to nothing, and it's a mini getaway. And that's kind of how Chicago looks at going to other places. Like, I guess Nashville, not as much, but a few years ago, I know a lot of people that would just go down to Nashville, spend a weekend, go see the Blackhawks play the Predators, because they couldn't get Blackhawks tickets in Chicago. So they would go down to Nashville, and they would spend a weekend in Nashville and be like, okay, well, I went and had fun, and it was like a weekend getaway, went to see the game because I could get tickets and they were cheaper. It's a nice drive down there. So that's now becoming what Chicago is for, the Bulls.
You never would have thought they would have come to this, but here we are.
Yeah.
It was always the Bulls fans traveled everywhere to see the team play. I mean, if you go back on YouTube, the full game is posted where they won their 70th game in 96. Do you remember where that was? It was in Milwaukee against the Bucks. And just listen to when the Bulls score, listen to at the end of the game, and when they pan over the crowd, it was a sold-out crowd, and the place the old Bradley Center held 18, 19,000, 20,000 people. There was at least 15,000 Bulls fans there that night. They traveled everywhere to see this team.
It is nice when the teams have contrasting colors, so you can definitely tell them apart. If you're in LA and the Cubs are playing the Dodgers, sometimes it's hard to tell because they're both blue. So you can't differentiate. But with the Bucks, they're green, the Bulls are red. So it was all pretty well for non colorblind people, like that is easy to differentiate. Like Bears Packers, the blue versus the green, it's easy to tell. So that's the fun part. It sucks when they blend and you can't really tell. You can just tell by the cheers. But when you see that your team is just dominating in attendance on the road, that's awesome.
You know, it's really funny you mentioned that because I don't know. I talked about it on the show before, but if anyone, this was in 2017. So if there are any new listeners or if there are any Cubs fans who remember this, do you remember the story I told you about when I saw the Blue Jays come to Wrigley Field?
I don't know if I remember the story.
Well, my dad and I went to the Cubs Blue Jays game in 2017. The Cubs won that game and they swept that series. But, the Blue Jays, blue and white. What do the Cubs predominantly have? Blue and white. So when you're in the stadium and you're looking around, you see all blue and white. Seems normal. You don't really look close at the logos on people's shirts because you can only see so far. You can only make out so much. But when the Blue Jays came to bat and they scored a run in the first inning, it suddenly felt like it was a road game at Wrigley Field. You couldn't tell just by looking around when nothing was happening, but as soon as the Blue Jays did something, you heard and saw how many Blue Jays fans there were. So they really kind of blended in.
That's weird. Like Wrigley's usually not like that.
No, it was a hostile. Like they were all very classy. So I don't want to say hostile in terms of they were all visiting fans that were being rowdy and awful. They were actually really cool, but hostile.
The fact that they just the sheer numbers.
Right. It actually started in the pregame after the national anthem. As soon as Wayne Mesber stopped singing, this loud "Let's Go Blue Jays" chant started, and it was crazy loud. And then they scored the first inning run, the Blue Jays did, and oh my God, the place was almost shaking. It was that loud. I'm like, holy crap. And this was also an interesting game because it was the first time Miguel Montero came back to Wrigley Field after getting cut by the Cubs. You remember that whole ordeal?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there was I was listening to the radio post game. After the post game, they had it was back. I think it was back when it was Bernstein and McKnight, not McKnight. Goff.
Boers. Oh
no,
okay.
This was after Boers was gone. It was Bernstein and Goff, and they were talking about the boos they heard from Miguel Montero, and they're like, "Why were you booing Miguel Montero?" Here's the thing: Miguel Montero came up right after the Blue Jays scored. And there was this loud roar in the stadium and another "Let's Go Blue Jays" chant. And the Cubs fans were trying to boo them and drown them out. And the people thought they were booing Miguel Montero. They were just trying to drown out the Blue Jays fans as someone that was there because they were so loud I couldn't even hear Miguel Montero's name being called on the PA system. I didn't realize he was batting until like 2 pitches in. And I looked at the board and I saw him batting. I'm like, oh, wait, that's Miguel Montero.
Yeah, I went to a game at the Met Stadium. I can want to call it Shea, but it was whatever the stadium after Shea. Yeah, Citi Field. I went there when I lived in Philadelphia. I would go up to New York quite a bit because it's like Chicago to Milwaukee away, so pretty close. And we went to maybe it was still Shea. I'm trying to think of because Sammy Sosa was still.
It
playing.
had to be Shea.
So it might. Yeah, this must have still been Shea. We went to the game, and it was just. This was another one where it's hard to tell because the Mets wear blue and the Cubs wear blue, but it was just so many Cubs fans, and I was wearing a Greg Maddux jersey, and when I was leaving, we were walking back. We'd taken the subway there because I was staying with some friends. And as we're walking back, just a random guy drives by, slows his car down and goes, and it's a bunch of people that are native New Yorkers that aren't wearing any baseball gear and me wearing Greg Maddux jersey. And he just rolls up and he goes, "Hey, Sammy Sosa, go after yourself."
What? You look nothing like it.
I was like, "Welcome to New York."
Wait, was that the Maddox jersey you gave me?
Yes.
Sweet. So now I have a cool backstory with that.
Yes. So yeah, and that day, Sammy Sosa went 0 for 5 with 5 strikeouts. I'm pretty certain.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, Sammy.
Yeah.
That was bad,
Oh,
Sammy.
Sammy.
Yeah.
And that had to be what, like late 90s, early 2000s?
That had to been like 2003,
4?
4, somewhere around there.
Because if Maddox came back to the Cubs in 04 and Sosa was still on the team, it had to have been 04. Unless that jersey was... But they didn't have that type of jersey before Maddox pitched, right?
I don't
It's
think
blue.
so. Yeah, it's the blue. So yeah, it must have been that year.
Okay, yeah. That's funny.
This guy just like literally was driving down the street and slowed down to almost a stop so he could yell, and then kept driving.
That's called you, Sammy Sosa. And then you look behind you, and all of a sudden you heard...
It's like, John Lackey. I haven't even been to the Cubs yet, but I'm rooting, tooting mad on this. This really chaps my ass. I'm red-assed about this.
What are you red-assed about? I don't know, I just am.
Which way the wind's blowing?
And then he just turns his head and continues forward, just...
The fact that my favorite chaw don't come in a green package. I want to just two things with the Bears, and then we'll finish up with the Blackhawks. The first one is I've gotten a couple Bears questions from people. One is on Kyle Long. I want to know what the Bears do with Kyle Long, and I guess that's the $8 million cap hit question. What do you do with Kyle Long? And I think this is a hard question for you or I to answer because it all depends on Kyle Long's health. If you can say Kyle Long is going to be healthy for 16 games, then you don't even think about parting ways with Kyle Long because he's absolutely the best option that you have, and he's going to make that offensive line better. But if you're going to get injured Kyle Long or nagging injury Kyle Long that he plays through, then I'm behind the decision of either cutting him or reworking his contract to make it more favorable to the team, because that leaves a tough situation for the Bears because they don't have backups. I don't think they have any backups under contract. So, you need Kyle Long to play vast majority of the games, and you need him to play at a high level to make this even remotely worth it as a football deal.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I don't think you just want to get rid of him, even despite the injuries, because what if he goes somewhere else and he stays healthy and he's really good? Then you would have gotten rid of Kyle Long out of fear that he's going to be hurt. I think you have to keep him aboard and pray that he stays healthy, because when he is healthy, he makes a difference.
I mean, you could always go to him and say, "Hey, we want to rework your deal," and that's always a possibility. But the thing with that is, the player has to be willing to do so, and they have to have some sort of benefit, and it's usually they take a pay cut, but then some of their salary then gets guaranteed as a signing bonus. So they get some benefit, even though you're taking things away. And when you go to a player and say, we want to rework your contract, you can't just walk in there and be like, oh, we want to rework it. And they say no. And you go, okay, we walk away. You have to be in a position that if they say no, then you be willing to move on from that player. And like you said, that's a tough situation to walk away from if he plays the way he played last year when he was healthy was
you saw the difference
really
in
good.
That Minnesota game.
Yeah. So if he's healthy for somebody else, you're just gonna. I mean, you think you get beat up about Robbie Gould, you're gonna get real beat up about Kyle Long, especially since you don't know where your starter is gonna be. But it reworking that deal or cutting him really gives you some more flat cap flexibility that you're in a little bit of a pinch. You're not in a major pinch, but you're in a little bit of a pinch, and every opportunity to give yourself some more cap room is helpful. So I would not be surprised if they talk to him about a contract renegotiation, rework that deal. But I would honestly be surprised if they flat out just cut him.
Yeah, despite all the injury problems, you would basically be cutting a Pro Bowl player. And I understand the injuries make it tough and the age makes it tough. He's going to be 30. He's either going to be 30 or he is 30. Right now, Spot Check says he's 30, so I'm going to go with 30. And for those wondering what he's making, basically next year, his cap hit is going to be $8.5 million. The next year is going to be $9.6 million. And then the last year is going to be $8.9 million. So he's on the books until 2021. I should say through 2021. He's a UFA in 2022, unrestricted free agent. The numbers I gave you, the 8.5, the 9.6, the 8.9, those are the cap hit numbers. So that's basically the basics of his contract right there. I don't know if he's going to be healthy going forward, but I think he's too good of a player to just cut because you're afraid of injury. I know he's eating up cap, but you would have to feel really good about replacing him if you were going to.
And you have a lot less draft picks this year than you typically do because of some trades, or the Khalil Mack and the Anthony Miller trades. You're lacking in the quantity of draft picks, so you don't have as much leeway to bring in somebody that, if you bring in a guard from a first round or second round, you're probably pretty high on them to start the season as a starter, where you can move on, but you don't have that flexibility. Your first pick is in the third round, so you're in a position where you're trying to find impactful players, and if you go into it going, well, we need a guard, that's when you start getting in trouble, because if you draft out of need rather than best player, that's when you get in a pickle. And that's where Ryan Pace has been very successful, is going best player available. First round, he's typically kind of done, some need positions, and that's kind of bit him in the ass. But when you draft best player available, you've seen some really good work out of Ryan Pace. Tariq Cohen and Anthony Miller and Amos was the previous regime. The Eddie Jackson. You've seen some really good draft picks come in those middle to late rounds.
And that's the thing with the football draft, is it's not like, I don't know, another example, I guess baseball would be the closest, or basketball would probably be the best, where late round draft picks, either every now and then one will hit, but there's not a whole lot down there, as compared to the NFL, where you can get really good draft picks that end up being incredibly huge impacts in the later rounds.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows Tom Brady was a 6th round draft pick.
Wow, really? I've never.
Yeah, I know. Was it Antonio Brown? Wasn't he like a 5th round draft pick or 4th round draft pick?
It could have been.
So
and then we get Jordan Howard. Was that the 4th or the 5th round?
I think it was a 5th round.
Yeah.
Eddie Jackson, I believe it was a 5th round.
Would have been a first rounder if he was healthy in college, but yes.
So you don't know. I mean, you just don't know. So yeah, you're right. Is you draft somebody. Basketball is 2 rounds. And if you draft somebody outside of the top 10 picks, you're probably getting a buster.
Yeah,
And baseball and football, what is baseball, like 9,000 rounds?
there's a
You know,
lot.
yeah, like, the 6-year-old down the street from me got drafted, by the Dodgers. Uh, it's everybody gets drafted, but football those picks are valuable, even those late rounders, because you get your special teams players and you get your project offensive linemen. And those are usually where you find value in there. And as long as there's still special teams, you are going to need those guys to, for special teams players.
Right, so we may not have as many draft picks this year, but it doesn't mean we can't draft anyone of note for the future.
Yeah. I mean, so I'm not worried about it. But the point is that without your first or second round picks, you don't have as much flexibility to bring in a guard that, you can almost guarantee is going to be a starter. You're left with signing a different free agent to replace Kyle Long. And I just don't know if you have the flexibility to move on from him at this point.
Right, I agree there.
The other question I've gotten from a couple people is, so now we know Kareem Hunt is not going to be a Bear. And man, the Cleveland Browns moved quick on him, and they have gotten, as far as I've seen, next to no backlash.
I'm kind of surprised, actually. I thought there'd be a bit more.
I think the Browns fans are just so desperate to win. They're like, whatever, not saying nothing. But they signed him to a 1-year, $1 million contract, and who knows how long he's going to be suspended. I've heard people go as low as 2 games, as high as 8 games. Even if you go the 8 games, the Cleveland Browns are getting half of a season from that guy, and they'll pay $500,000 for it. And he, 2 years ago, led the NFL in rushing. So that's a hell of a deal. And I'm torn as a Bears fan what I would have done if they would have gotten him. Like I said, it's a much different situation than some of the others where, it was definitely a wrong situation. And somebody that follows me on Twitter made a comment that, like, I don't want somebody that would kick a woman on my team. And I said, what if he could kick her 45 yards through the uprights? And I chuckled. I didn't get as much reaction as I thought, but I get that point. You don't really want somebody that's gonna hit a woman, but it's a much different situation than Ray Rice, where that's a domestic situation. This was a random woman he had just met, and I don't want to victim blame, but she was the one that was poking the hornet's nest, and he was definitely wrong what he did, but she was poking the hornet's nest, and it was just a random stranger. That was a hotbed incident, not a domestic incident. So I just don't know how I would have landed had the Bears signed him. It would have been some soul searching there, but that's all water under the bridge because it's not something we have to worry about. But the question, this is a long-winded way to get to the question, is I've got multiple people ask, what about Le'Veon Bell to the Bears?
Not happening. That's my opinion. Just flat out not happening.
That's where I am at with that. And that has nothing to do with, do I want it to happen? I would love to see Le'Veon Bell as a Bear. he is ridiculously talented, and he would make life so much easier for Mitch Trubisky because you would have a solid running game that you could count on, and you wouldn't have to pass as much, and you would have shorter downs for Mitch Trubisky on third down. And I think you'd get so much benefit for Mitch Trubisky and the offense and time of possession, which leads your other team to not have the ball as much, makes it easier for your defense. A lot of good things, but here's the issue: is he is still technically part of the Pittsburgh Steelers. They have until like the first week of March to figure out what they want to do with him.
Which is coming up.
But it is coming up. They still are able to use the franchise tag on him. And, when you use a franchise tag on a player, part of the collective bargaining agreement is if you do it 3 years in a row, that third year the team gets penalized and you have to pay that player a lot of money.
Yeah.
So for running backs, they tagged him the last 2 years, and so if he had played last year, this year, and they tagged him again this year, he would be making like $20 million as a running back. But the Steelers' contention is he didn't sign that franchise tag, so it's like it never happened. So they still have that franchise tag under their belt, and I don't think he's gonna play chicken 2 years in a row. I think he'll play. The other option is they could put a transition tag on him where they can match any offer that he gets on the table. Or they can just let him walk and then get the compensation pick that, from him signing a contract. But the issue comes in, even if they let him go and just walk away with nothing and he's a free agent, there's some running back starved teams with more cap room than you that are going to jump and pay him. And if you look at running back salaries, he's going to want to be paid like a top 3 running back, which means he's going to be paid $14-15 million a year.
Yeah, we don't have that room.
You don't have that luxury. You don't have that luxury to be able to pay a running back that kind of money. Even if you move on from Jordan Howard and don't pay that salary, it's still a drop in the bucket. You just don't have the flexibility. And I don't think he's taking some discounted deal, and by discounted, I mean like $9-10 million a year. And running back salaries are weird. If you look at the top running back salaries in the NFL, I just closed my browser tab. NFL running back salaries is where is this? So going by over the cap, Todd Gurley is the highest paid running back. He gets 14.375. David Johnson gets 13 million. And then you have a significant drop off after that. Devontae Freeman is 8.25. LaShawn McCoy makes $8 million a year. Saquon Barkley makes 7.8. Jerick McKinnon, 7.5. Leonard Fournette, 6.78. Lamar Miller, 6.5. Zeke Elliott, 6.2. Duke Johnson, 5.2. So on and so forth. So the vast majority of running backs in that upper echelon are making around the $5 to $8 million range. And it's 2 running backs that are just through the roof. But Le'Veon Bell is going to want that kind of money, and he's probably going to command that kind of money. And, that basically takes out the entirety of the Bears' cap room. I just don't see a realistic way for the Bears to bring him in.
No, if they're gonna upgrade their running back core, they're gonna do it in the draft. Again, they've been able to draft running backs in later rounds. They already have a solid running back core, so if you want to add another piece to it, you can do that easily without making a controversial move for a Kareem Hunt or making a trade that's unrealistic in Le'Veon Bell. So honestly, I don't think it's worth even thinking about the Le'Veon Bell stuff because it's so unrealistic. That's just my take.
I mean, if you want somebody that I think still has some gas in the tank, that's going to be a heck of a lot cheaper. I have a feeling that Buffalo is going to cut Shady McCoy, and I think he would fit really well with Matt Nagy's trying to do. And I think he's going to come at a fraction of the price. He's making $8 million now, but there's nobody else paying him $8 million a year because he's at the back nine of his career. But
if you were to do that, would you keep Howard and Cohen? I mean, obviously you keep Cohen, but would you keep Howard and have more of like a three-headed monster approach there?
If I were to do that, I would probably trade Jordan Howard on draft night and then draft a middle round running back. And so your two-headed monsters, McCoy and Tariq Cohen, and then that rookie back is the one that has, is the competition for, and the backup, the competition to take playing time from somebody and the backup. I think that's probably the smartest way to go.
Okay. Yeah. That's interesting.
I love Jordan Howard and I'd hate to see him go. He just doesn't fit with what this team's trying to do. He's a rhythm runner. And the way he needs carries and the way he needs to run just isn't meshing with what the Bears are trying to do. I think a LaShawn McCoy would fit a heck of a lot better. And he had a down year last year, and I think part of it is Buffalo was terrible, and part of it he's just not the same player. But I think if you use him, mix him in with Tariq Cohen and a third running back that you draft, I think you could really resurrect his career, which is, a couple years ago he was good. He was really good.
Yeah, for sure. That's very true. I really like Jordan Howard, and I defend Jordan Howard to the end, but I think he's probably gone in this offseason. I'd put my money on him being traded. I don't know about you, but
yeah, I don't think he's on the Bears next year. I think they trade him, and I don't know what his stock is, but I think you could at least get back the round pick that you got him for. You can probably get a 4th or 5th round for him. So LaShawn McCoy last year had 514 yards rushing, but 2017 he had 1,138 yards rushing, and in 2016 he had 1,267 rushing and 5.4 yards per carry. So, he is not far from removed from being a heck of a player. And receiving, last year he caught 34 passes, the year before 59, the year before that 50. So he's a threat in the passing game as well. So I really see that him getting cut. So I would not mind the Bears picking him up. But we'll see. So I guess the last thing to talk about is the Blackhawks. The streak is definitely over. They got hammered by the Boston Bruins. And they lost again to the Blue Jackets. So the Blackhawks need more consistency. By consistency, I mean they've been consistently bad in the first period, but they need to play well consistently through all 3 periods, and I think that's been a problem all year. You have periods where they play amazing, periods where they're bad, and I think you need to play a whole 3 period game, and you don't have a team talent enough to play flat for an entire period and win games.
Here's my thing on the Blackhawks. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see them lose like another few games in a row now. They haven't played very well at all the past week, and they were lucky to get that win against the Devils because Cam Ward was really good. They were pretty lucky to get that win against the Red Wings because Cam Ward was really good. You kind of saw what a real playoff team in Boston did to them. If the Blackhawks somehow sneaked into the playoffs, that might be a preview of what you'd see happen to them, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah, it was the ease that Boston scored in that first period. It was sort of embarrassing. It was embarrassing.
Not
good. In these last 3 games, the Blackhawks have been outscored 8-3 in the first period. They went down 3-1 Boston, 2-1 to the Devils, 3-1 to the Blue Jackets. That is tough. This team is just not talented enough to play good teams from behind and come back to win consistently. I mean, every once in a while things happen, but for the most part if you go down 3-1 to Boston, you're not winning, especially in Boston. You're not winning. So you just can't go down. You can't give up that many goals in the first period. And the thing is they struck first. Blackhawks were winning 1-0, and literally, I was at my friend's house and I was talking with his kid, and I look up and I'm like, all right, it's 1-1. No, now it's 2-1. Up 3-1. You're just like, what the hell is going on?
It was like boom, boom, boom.
The Blackhawks have the tools to be able to dominate the possessions and create scoring chances. They're not doing it consistently, and the defense is so bad that you're just leaving your goalie hanging out to dry. It's a tough spot here.
It is. And I tried to enjoy that win streak as best as I could. And I tried to keep the right balance of let's see them, keep winning, keep playing well, but also understand that, this team, while it's not as bad as we once may thought, it's still not a playoff team, or at least one that would go far in the playoffs if they did squeak in, because, I mean, let's face it, the Wild are kind of keeping the Blackhawks in the race because of how they're just completely spiraling downwards. I mean, they're not even 500 yet. They're not even at 500.
Yeah, it's I don't know. It's the Blackhawks are still at the bottom. They're still the bottom dwellers of the division and the conference, and they're still in the playoff hunt because there's a lot of mediocre hockey going on. But it's funny is if you look at Twitter, you listen to callers on sports radio, or just conversations with people, you hear a lot of people that are just really down on Brandon Saad. And honestly, if you look, Brandon Saad is on pace for about 27 goals and 50 points this season, which is like, career average numbers for him. So you're getting what you get out of Brandon Saad. Plus he's a pretty good defensive forward. He's a two-way forward. So I I don't know what you're expecting from him. You're getting what you get.
Yeah, I mean, last year was not really fun to watch. He had a down year last year, but now he's 19 goals. He's at 34 points. He has one more goal than he did all of last year, and has one less point than he did all of last year. Yeah, if he goes on the same pace, he is going to finish with typical Brandon Saad numbers, around 25 goals, around 25, 30 assists, and maybe around 50 points. It's pretty much what he's on pace for.
Yeah. But so I just, it's frustrating to see people. I don't know what they were expecting.
It's because he's not Panarin.
And the funny thing is we just played Artemi Panarin and we got a big dose of what Artemi Panarin can be. What do you have? 2 goals and an assist. And he's just an offensive powerhouse.
He is.
But he's not a two-way player. He is a scorer, and I think the Blackhawks fans just really miss him and what he could be with this team. And it's funny that's the Panarin and the Blackhawks, they just love flirting with each other. Panarin has said he's not going to re-sign with this team. He may, but he's not going to sign an extension. He's going to free agency. And Blackhawks fans take that as he's coming back. And I hate to break it to you, is he doesn't play defense as a forward, but he also is not a defenseman. And that is where the Blackhawks struggles.
They got to focus on defense first.
Yes. And so are you going to sign another massive contract to a player when it's not fixing one of your glaring needs?
No, if they could somehow land him at a cheaper deal, that's not going to happen, but you'd have to do that after you make some moves for better defense, because that's the number one issue. You can score. The Blackhawks don't have problems scoring. It's the defense.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about some of the metrics, and the Blackhawks with terrible defensive metrics were winning games because of their offensive ability. So they don't necessarily need Artemi Panarin. That is not the weakness of this team. So I understand the appeal of having him on there because, Kane loved playing with him. That was just a really great line.
A rejuvenated Kane, Panarin, Saad, and Taves would be pretty epic, yes. But
yeah, and it's exciting to watch. But it's going to exacerbate the issue with the Blackhawks because the Blackhawks are a bad defensive team with multiple good defensive forwards. If you put out another guy that just Kane as a whole is not a good defensive player. You put Artemi Panarin with him, and on top of the poor defensive team that the Blackhawks already have, and that just you're going to need to score a lot of goals to win games. So I understand the excitement of it, and fans liked him, but it's just unrealistic. He's not coming back to the Blackhawks unless Stan's dumb, which he might be. It's a fantasy, and they need to fix this, the blue line to get better.
For sure.
But the funny thing is Duncan Keith has actually been playing pretty well lately.
Hey, hasn't he scored a few goals too? I know he scored the other day in at Boston, but yeah,
he's been playing really well. And the funny thing is, you're like, well, the trade deadline is coming up, and you're like, man, does this elevate his trade value? Will he waive his no trade clause? If between the Seabrook and Keith contracts, you'd much rather keep the Keith contract if you can only get rid of one, because it's the smaller cap number and Keith is playing at a higher level than Seabrook. So you absolutely.
It's also the more likely to be moved.
So, but if you could get rid of one of those contracts off your books, you do it. And if he's playing well, you're like, crap, is this the time we could get rid of him? That some desperate team that's on a playoff run, takes on this contract for the next however many years. I just to get out from under that
He would have to.
would be huge,
Well, he would have to waive that no trade clause. That's
which
kinda,
I just don't think he's going to do.
I don't either.
He is
I get
here
that.
until the bitter end of that contract.
Yep. Same with Seabrook.
Yep. But yeah, this team is struggling with the same things they've been struggling with. The penalty kill is terrible. They turn the puck over too much. Out of place defensemen, leaving open lanes and one-timers galore for opposing teams. Hanging the goalie out to dry. Not getting sticks in the passing lanes. It's the same things over and over. And it's so frustrating.
Is that all?
That was the short list.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, look, they could have easily lost that Detroit game. They could have easily lost that game against the Devils. The Devils had so many chances in that first period. And in the third period, he had to make so many big saves.
Yeah, what was in the Red Wings are a terrible team, and didn't they have?
They skated all over the Hawks
Yeah,
in the second half.
It was Cam Ward, wasn't it? That was in the goal. Yeah, and
Yes.
what did he make? 43 saves, 44 saves.
It was in the mid-40s.
Yeah, it's just unreal. So yeah, that just got to get better, and you hope that Jeremy Colleton made it a focus to fix the power play and some of the offensive struggles, and they've taken a step forward in that. I mean, the power play has been very good. They've been scoring a lot of goals. You hopefully, when he has the off season and training camp and to work on some of the other issues, you cross your fingers that with some of the young players that they've drafted to be defensemen and having time to focus on some of the things you want to work on, that you could be a better team next year. But I just don't see Artemi Panarin being the answer to any of those problems.
No, I mean, it would give you obviously another scoring weapon, as we know Panarin is, but yeah, it doesn't help you defensively at all.
No.
Maybe it would help you win a few more games if you won more like 8-7 games, but
And as much as I every once in a while love to see a good 8-7 game,
oh, they're fun as hell.
is sometimes I just want to see my team not give up easy goals or, leave the goalie having to do karate ninja backflips to stop a puck because, they're allowing, cross crease passes with no sticks there and nobody to help the defenseman or the goalie.
It's also not going to win you any cups.
No, it is not. I mean,
Not
the
in
Blackhawks
Sarah.
won. The Blackhawks won 3 Stanley Cups by playing great defense.
Especially Duncan Keith in those 2015 playoffs. It's go back and watch the 2015 playoffs and just see how amazing Duncan Keith was in that run. It's almost like he said, I'm going to drain every last bit of effectiveness I have so we can get out this last cup run.
Yeah, and you had Hjalmarsson, who played extraordinarily well. You had Oduya play well. Seabrook was playing great.
Seabrook had the clutch overtime goals over the years.
Yeah, so you had great defensive play on top of, absolute lights out goaltending. So sure, you had good offense, but you won those Stanley Cups on the back of your defenseman and your goalie.
Yeah, and that's another thing. What's going to happen with Corey Crawford next year? We don't know. Are we going to have to go out and get some more goalie depth? Because look, you've locked up Colin Delia, but you're still going to need someone else. Is it going to be Corey Crawford? Is it going to be another free agent? because I really don't see them re-signing Cam Ward. I don't. So you're gonna need somebody else.
Problems.
Everywhere.
Yeah. But that's all I really had to talk about. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to discuss.
Not really. There's just one more thing I wanted to bring up about the Cubs, and I'm going to make this brief because I'm really kind of tired of thinking and talking about it. But
I know what you're going to talk about, and
yeah,
I have nothing to say about it, so I will let you say your piece.
I really don't have much to say either. I just thought I'd bring it up. It was cringeworthy listening to that Addison Russell presser. I've only heard snippets of it, but it was very robotic. It seemed very rehearsed. He wasn't actually reading a script, but I feel like he had it all scripted out and they probably did practice runs. He said, "I'm glad you asked that question" on multiple occasions, also claiming that he didn't know how much he was hurting his ex-wife, and those accounts are accurate. I don't see how you can't see that. So I'm so done with him. That's all I'm going to say.
Same boat.
Yep.
But that's going to do it for this episode of Bill Swerski Sports Talk Chicago. I want to thank everybody so much for listening. Please make sure you hit subscribe however you listen to podcasts, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, the TuneIn app. Follow us on social media at ChiFanPat1, at Swerski Sports, Facebook.com/Swerski Sports, SwerskiSports.com. Please share this podcast with friends that like Chicago sports because that is how we grow the podcast. And thank you so much for listening. And until next time, bear down.
Cubs win! What a lucky break! The good Lord wants the Cubs to win!
We thank Ditka and God for all they have provided.
Cubs win! Cubs win! Cubs win!
Oh, I don't want her. You can have her. She's a Packer fan. She can't fit in my van.
And she looks like Remember, New Yorkers, smoking crack is not legal on the plains. Bears 31 to -7. The Bears!
Oh, when the Bears go bearing down.